Wait till they get a load of me.
For anybody who actually saw my blog entry, that was in there before. And yes, I stole that from Jack Nicholson. All right, so what we're going to talk about here today is Ops Manager evolution. So taking the Operations Manager environments that you have today, what's out there at the moment? And let me start with this. Let me ask a question. A quick poll. How many people out there are currently running Operations Manager in some capacity? Please raise your hand. All right. This is definitely the target audience. This is exactly where we want to be. This session is about your environments. And the funny part of this that I can actually say is, based on some of the people that I've already seen here today, it's literally about your environments. There's 2 or 3 people in this audience that you're going to recognize things I'm talking about because it's stuff that we've worked together on historically to start putting these things together. So you're going to see a lot of stuff related to that. My goal for each of you in this and my quest for each of you in this is think about your environments. What's relevant in your environment? And what I want to do is I want to hold all Q&A towards the end so that we can talk about what's relevant to you. These sets, as you can see over here, these are incentives, shall we say, for holding questions towards the end of the session. All right, so here's our agenda. And I do want to mention one other thing first. We have a big agenda on this thing. And part of it that I realized is I want to cover as much of this as well as possible, but there's a lot of things that there's additional reading out there that you'd want to be able to do to truly get all the details on it. So what I've done is I've hyperlinked almost everything in this presentation. So any additional topics, any additional readings related to it will be directly hyperlink accessible through this. So we're going to talk through the agenda as we're talking about right here. And we're going to start with the lessons learned aspect. As you can tell, top 3 asks. Big shout out to one of the guys who may be in the audience who actually came up with that point. We're going to hit lightly on tuning of Operations Manager. I know tuning of Operations Manager probably not the #1 most interesting thing on the planet, but it is very relevant. We're going to talk about how to customize, daily living, maintaining it, and other things above and beyond that. But first, I wanted to start with lessons learned the hard way. This is fact. Let me tell you this. I'm a consultant. I'm an Operations Manager geek. This is what I do, okay? So I go out and I can deploy Operations Manager in multiple different client environments on a regular basis. But I can tell you right now, the #1 success criteria that's going to determine whether a year later or 2 years later when we go back to that client, if Operations Manager is still running, is this. It's you. It's the people who are out there on that client site. If you've embraced this technology, if you've said that this is just going to be the way that we're going to do it, and you've learned it and own it, that's the #1 success condition that we've seen in our deployments. Because as consultants, we can go out and we can deploy great technologies for you. But if you don't own it when it's all said and done, a year or 2 later, it's going to be vapor. The second most important success factor for Operations Manager engagements is company buy-in. We've seen this, one of the large retail companies who's actually represented here today. What they've done is a masterful job getting this integrated into their different groups. So what they've actually done is they've started a groundswell where they worked with one group, and they got this one group completely bought off on Operations Manager by giving them customized dashboards, customized views, really targeting Operations Manager for their environment. And they used that as a catalyst for all the different groups. So now they've got an environment where each of these different groups is bought in, so much so that the Ops Manager Administrator, who's sitting in the audience at the moment, is probably more than overswamped right now because he's got different groups coming to him saying, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, okay? That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for the point where, #1, we're not generating so many alerts that the first thing people are going to do is create a rule within Outlook and shove it into a folder. That's #1. And #2, we want to create an environment where they're coming to us and they're saying, you know what? I need to be able to do this. I need to be able to do more things. How can you help us do this? So it needs to become cultural, almost viral. And the other key thing about Operations Manager is this. It's one of those few products you can actually flat out say this. What does it do? Not much. You know, out of the box, just about nothing. The only thing Ops Manager does out of the box is this. It gives you a heartbeat. You've deployed agents over here. The agents are going to report back. They're going to let you know they're up, they're down, they're talking, they're not talking, and the rest of it. That's really all that it does. Now, that framework, however, is what we're talking about here. The framework is what we use to build upon all of this with our different management packs. Okay, and everybody out here is familiar with the common ones, your Active Directory management packs, your Exchange management packs, Windows-based operating systems, and things of those nature. But what I'm talking about here is not only just those, but also your own customized management packs that you're building. Third-party management packs, thinking about things like, do I want to integrate my VMware environment within this? Those are the types of things we're talking about here. I want to do one other quick poll. This is definitely a geek question here, but I know I've got ops manager administrators out here, and some of y'all are geeks like me. Some of you may be offended by the term geek, but trust me, it's a term of endearment. How many people out here know what the coffee pot monitoring management pack is? All right, we got about a third. Okay, that's not bad, actually. If you think about it, you got a bunch of guys working on a lab out there who came up with this really cool idea, which, granted, it has, by itself, no practical application whatsoever. But it's a phenomenally cool concept. These guys detect the conditions based upon pixelation of how far full a coffee pot is. Okay, granted, you're not going to use that in your NOC. But my goal for this session, and in setting the tone here, I'm going to tell you where this came from. My goal for this was not to think outside of the box within Operations Manager, but to drop kick that box down the hallway. So what I'm going to show you here really quick is a combination of 3 technologies put together, which had never been put together before. And to be able to make this happen, I had to call in the big guns. All right, I'm an IT professional, 20 plus years in this industry. Faced with a situation where it's a technology I've never worked with before and it's kind of daunting. So what did I do? Just like any 20-year veteran, I've got my 12-year-old son to help. Worked like a champ. Bought him an Xbox game. He spent 24 hours working on this thing. So, with that, I give you Gen Next NOC.
Welcome to the Catapult Systems Simulated Network Operations Center. I'd like to introduce you to our operator today. It's Gavin. Gavin, would you wave hi? Excellent. Gavin is actually going to demonstrate for us the capabilities of Operations Manager when using Civision Live Maps combined with a Microsoft Kinect. And with the Kinect, we're actually going to be able to navigate through different pieces of our dashboard. Gavin, would you show us an example how we can move the mouse around within the dashboard? Excellent. So we can see different sections of it. We can double-click, we can open, and we can change state dependent upon those. Within this dashboard, we're using distributed applications. We're also doing a series of different tests and synthetics on these. And what we'll be going through is a process of how we could actually navigate through a Network Operations Center environment while using a Microsoft Kinect. It looks like we've got an error in the time tracking section. Would you open that up for us, please, Kevin? Looks like it's probably from one of our web servers. Open that up, please. And it looks like Web 05. Would you open up the state of Web 05? We'll see what's going on down there. Excellent. Looks like it is offline. Why don't we go ahead and try to restart the web server, please. Excellent. Thank you very much, Kevin. And we'll go ahead and we'll go back from here and take a quick look. Let's see how our overall health is looking right now. All right, and as you can see, our health has returned back to a healthy state. So we can actually see now that our time tracker application's gone back online. Excellent. Thank you, Gavin, for the demonstration. I hope you...
All right, so now I'm not expecting that anybody is going to go out there and immediately start integrating Microsoft Kinect within their environments. However, what I am going to say is this, that it points out an interesting approach to technology that hasn't been really seen before. We think about things within the genre of how we deal with them right now. And the ability to just interface with an application differently than we had before kind of changes the equation. So just think about it from that perspective. The next thing I wanted to talk about is I had a conversation with somebody who spends a lot of time in Operations Manager within Microsoft, and he told me there's 3 things that everybody asks for related to Operations Manager. The first is they want to know what is the status related to network monitoring. What can I do with it? Okay? First and foremost, SNMP level monitoring. Okay? How many people out there can speak MIB? All right, so there's about 20, 30, 40 people in the audience who can speak MIB. Good for you guys and girls, because I certainly can't do so. So I'll be the first one to say SNMP monitoring, a little bit challenging because the MIBs are not included. It's a little bit more difficult. My tool of choice for simple environments is this TCP port monitoring concept. So within the TCP port, all I need to know is an IP address and a port that this thing's going to run off of. I can regularly check on that. I can report times back from it. Works like a champ. There's also multiple different third-party ping management packs that are available for free that let you find out what's going on out there, both through System Center Central and OpsLogic. Another option, and we're seeing this a lot within our customers nowadays that are existing SolarWinds customers, is beginning to do the integration of SolarWinds within Operations Manager. So that allows you to be able to leverage that investment you've got, bring it in directly into Operations Manager, and work from it that way. Then there's JalaSoft. OpsLogic has a management pack. If you're interested about what is Microsoft going to do to evolve this, you want to check out session BB06. That's related to network monitoring around Operations Manager in the 2012 edition. The next most common question is, what is Operations Manager doing? How do I know? The question that's almost regularly asked is, I want to know every single rule and monitor that's executing on every system in my environment. Okay, first and foremost, what a painful question. I mean, anybody who's actually dealt with that before can chuckle and can laugh, because we all know that this is not the simplest thing available. I've listed some of the different routes you've got available on this. I'll flat out tell you none of them are really that good, but they'll give you something at least. Effective Configuration Viewer was pretty good, but it wasn't accurate or not accurate post R2. The second one is actually a PowerShell script that can do these things. There's a task associated with it, but the format of that task is pretty ugly. You can also use some reports, PowerShell, SQL queries together. Here's one that you may not know about yet. Marnix Wolf in the Netherlands did an article doing an overview of what's being monitored, and what he actually did within his blog article is he broke it down. How do I take all of this information, roll it up into Excel, and actually find out what's being monitored on these different systems? So that one's kind of cool and definitely something to look into. And then there is a third-party option here, Sylect Agent Explorer. My understanding on this is that it can give you a very comprehensive report. If you have to have it, that'll give you an option to be able to get it. Ops Manager 2012. I think you probably saw it in the earlier slide. I'm an Ops Manager MVP, so I'm privy to a lot of the stuff internally of what's going on. And I'll tell you this, even I don't have any idea whether they're doing anything related to this in 2012. So if anybody finds out, please post up on the blog or something. Let me know, because I'd love to know. The third is dashboards. Okay, I've done multiple different dashboard discussions and presentations and the rest of them. As a matter of fact, I think it's this stack over here has an article that I did on Windows IT Professional. Microsoft flat out missed the boat on this one when it comes to Ops Manager. All right, they built a dashboarding product for Configuration Manager, and I know there's a bunch of people out there who probably love Configuration Manager. I got one in the front row who thinks that Config Manager can do pretty much everything on the planet. He's right there. All right. But Configuration Manager needs a dashboard about 1% of what Operations Manager needs a dashboard for. Service Manager's got a dashboard also. Okay, so when we think dashboards and Operations Manager, this is pretty much all we get. This, state and alert and the rest of it. Not exactly what we're going to call a sexy UI, to quote a good friend of mine, who I think might even be in the audience at the moment. And not exactly the bling that you're looking for that's going to sell this type of a product. So Microsoft did step in and started making some enhancements around this. First one is the service level dashboard. Now, the service level dashboard's pretty good. What it allows you to be able to do is it allows you to be able to take and assign service level tracking metrics, identify for a distributed application, for other pieces and the rest of it, how up or down are they available, give you that reporting and everything. Now, the thing that's challenging with this is it's a very specific UI. Those web parts you see, those are the only web parts that you can use for it. The data, in terms of how it's stored in the data warehouse and the rest of it, phenomenally difficult to extract. I've got one of the guys in the audience right now. We've got an open ticket for 3 months now, working with a developer who's got to call into Microsoft trying to work through generating data from the service level dashboard and custom reports and dashboards and the rest of it. So it's very compartmentalized. It's a very painful experience to try to get stuff out of that. The next provided by Microsoft is Visio integration. I worked with a client in Tulsa just recently where they've built and architected all of their Visio diagrams that represent their entire infrastructure. Beautifully done. And they wanted to be able to state enable these. So you can take an existing Visio diagram, state enable those, drag and drop them in the rest. SharePoint 2010 Enterprise, big caveat to keep in the back of the brain, because you need to have the ability to be able to do specific files, which you only get these VDW files, is only available in the Enterprise edition of it. Next one is Civision Live Maps. You're going to see some of this as we go through and take a look at some of the demo environments and the rest of it. They provide up to 5 maps for free, so it makes a great short number of maps to be able to do within an environment. And the one on the right, or on your left, is, or sorry, your right, I can't do that, is an example of a distributed application which I've remapped into a live map. Okay? And before we go into that too much into the demo pieces of it, what I want to explain is why. Distributed application does a great job of laying out the relationship. I've got an entity, and that entity is containing multiple different things within it. Could be web servers, could be services, etc. And they all health roll up together. But when you see it in that distributed designer view, in essence, you get that view and that's all you get. You can't relay it out any way you want. You can't rename it. You can't format it. You can't do a whole lot of things with it. That's one of the reasons why I like the live maps pieces of it. Now, what I was very impressed with was the SCCM or SCSM dashboards for Operations Manager. And again, for the Configuration Manager guys in the front row there, yes, I'm actually giving kudos to Configuration Manager for something. That'll be probably the only one in the session. What they did with this, which is really well done, is it's very extendable. What you can do with it is you can actually, and we're going to take a look at these in a little bit, I'm going to crack one of these open, you can actually do SQL queries off of the database. So they pre-built their views. Their views are actually pre-built to give you related Configuration Manager information. The Config Manager dashboard is good. The Service Manager dashboard is better. And the reason I say that is the Service Manager dashboard actually adds multiple different tabs that you'll see as we go through some of the demo pieces. So what it allows you to be able to do is I can have Operations Manager view on one tab and my custom distributed application on a second and a third and a fourth, whatever I want to do with those. So it's very easy to be able to put those together. Now, how these work, which is some of the things that I'm going to throw out here for everybody to consider, is these are SQL queries off of the Operations Manager data warehouse or Operations Manager database. That's great, with one big caveat. Almost nobody in the community has documented good queries related to how you get data out of Operations Manager database or data warehouse. So the first thing I'd recommend is if you've got good queries that you've got out there, blog them, post them, share them. We need to start putting some of these things together because we can do some great stuff with this if we've got the queries out there to do it. We can also pull these together into an integrated solution. So this one shows an example where we've taken a custom application, put it up top. On the left, we actually see a synthetic web test response time, processor utilization associated with it, some other pieces. So we can pull these together and provide a very customized dashboard experience for what we're looking for here. So as I mentioned, third-party options, not only live maps, also Dundas dashboards. This is something that Microsoft very much took to heart. So if you're interested in the dashboard sections of this, definitely check out BB09 because they're going to discuss the whole new realm of what they're building within Operations Manager 2012. All right, so now we're moving into the dashboards and more section of this. And let me show you a quick walkthrough, a couple of odds and ends here. All right, so I'm going to start with the sample NOC view that you saw before. So this is actually tied into multiple different distributed applications. It's also tied into multiple different web links that we've got in place right now. So I'm going to start with this, I'm going to start with the Operations Manager link. All right. And within this, you see this is the Service Manager dashboard, as I mentioned before. So in this dashboard, what I can actually have, that's the multiple tabs that I was talking about up top. So I've got not only Ops Manager, but my synthetic and transactions and applications and distributed applications. In here, these queries, which I'll make these available, by the way, I've already canned this particular dashboard for Operations Manager, which I will be blogging on, and I'll be posting this. So if you install the Service Manager dashboard and then go through the installation process that I'm talking about, you'll actually be able to push this directly into your Service Manager configurations. But we've got a query which does percentage of our failed agents, give me alerts per day associated with it. From a tuning perspective, these are a couple of my favorites. I love to be able to tell the top 5 alerts by repeat count. I know they're not readable back there, but I'll tell you this much, the alerts aren't really that relevant in my environment because most of them were mass created. Down towards the bottom of this, as you can see, we've got different sizing. So if you want to be able to take a look at database or data warehouse sizing, you can actually see those here. You know, what's my free space? What's my breakout on this look like? And then down at the bottom, we've actually integrated another of the live maps views so we can see the overall health state associated with Operations Manager. So this is a quick, singular dashboard, and it's targeted. That's one of the key things we talked about here, and we're going to talk through more as we go through this, is it's targeted to your Operations Manager administrator. So this is your dashboard as an example. These gauges can easily be edited. As a matter of fact, this is where I go off demo script, so let's see what happens. One moment. So what we've got here, these various different ones. So you see the ones up top, those are actually the Configuration Manager ones. So we take a look here as an example, the Operation Manager alerts per day. If I do an edit on this, what I can actually see is my data set behind the scenes on it. So I'm currently just querying off of localhost, and I'm querying off the database of Operations Manager, and then I just have a specific SQL query associated with that. Let me zoom in, if it'll let me. It won't let me zoom in. Okay. So what I've actually got is the number of alerts per day are triggered towards the bottom, so I can see that data. And as you saw, it wasn't just data that was going through there. We actually have charts associated with this as well. So I think I'm using a gauge on this one. Maybe not. Hold on a minute. There we go. I was using a line chart. So number of alerts per day, it's defined here, and it's easy enough to be able to add pieces to this. So really, the only tough part of this entire equation is getting that SQL query. So if you've got those, again, that would be great to be able to share things of that nature. Now, what would dashboarding be without actually doing something just a little bit crazier than we normally do? So let me go with this one next. All right. How many people have heard of Power Gadgets? All right, we've got a handful, 20, 30 in the audience. All right. Power Gadgets is a kind of a cool concept here. They hooked me up with a demo version of this, and I've been working with it a little bit, and I'm going to point out what we've got here. So, in essence, this is the second way that we can use those same SQL queries. I can plug these into a Power Gadget, represent this data, and actually gadgetize this and put this on my desktop. So this top one that we see up over here, this is actually a SQL query that's running off of my Operations Manager database. Underneath that, I've got the Live Maps dashboard view targeted. Underneath that, I've got the pre-built one from Microsoft. And then, of course, underneath that, I've got the fact that it's 81 degrees in Dallas, Texas, which probably not all that relevant to the audience. But it proves the fact that at least they're real gadgets. So, as you can see, we can not only use SQL queries within the dashboarding components, but we can also use these as an example within PowerShell gadget or Power Gadgets. And to bring up one other point associated with this, I'm very, as y'all can tell, I'm very Operations Manager focused. But any of these dashboarding concepts also apply within your Configuration Manager environments, your Service Manager environments, any of those. They're just SQL queries. So as long as you can get to them, you can run with them. So with that, we'll head back over. Hold on a minute. All right, we're going to camp quickly on this, tuning in Operations Manager. I know that this is not one of the most interesting things, so I'm just going to point out the highlights associated with it. First off, Microsoft has an interesting definition of the word critical. Critical in Microsoft Management Pack technologies means critical for that management pack. Okay? Critical for that management pack may mean that my default website is down. Okay? Many, many organizations not only A, don't care if their default websites are down because they're not using them, but B, they prefer to actually leave them down because they don't know what's going to happen if they remove them from their environments in the first place. So what we have to do with an Operations Manager is figure out what's relevant versus what's not relevant. And it's not linked in here, but it's on my blog. I actually went through a process where we created a group, a dynamic group, which actually detects the default namings and actually we create an override on those which disables any monitoring of the default websites or your default application pools. So there's ways to be able to do that and do it dynamically so you don't have to do it for each individual one. But all this pulls back to one thing, which is what they define as critical may not actually be critical. Here's my definition, and here's most of my clients' definition for critical. It's critical if you need to wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning to let me know. Otherwise, it's not critical, period. So what we need to do with this is we need to actually tweak Operations Manager so it represents truly what's critical within your environment. Okay? And I wrote about this in something that I did recently with a webinar and a white paper with some of the crew over at Veeam. And what it comes down to is this. Microsoft put themselves in a great catch-22 section by getting themselves in this product to begin with. Their job is to provide a monitoring product which tells you proactively anything that's going to break in your environment, how you're supposed to tune your environment, and the rest of it. That's one hand. On the other hand, they're being given the task of, don't give me noise. And the problem is, how do you accomplish that balance? That balance is very, very difficult to accomplish. And as I know you all live this on a daily basis, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But the key is starting with defining critical. Use overrides, store them in an MP overrides, or preferably here, let's just start with the basics. Don't use the default management pack. For those of you who were here early, you may have seen the slide. Great trick on this one. Kevin Holman mentioned this one as well. You can rename the default management pack. I understand the fact that's not going to stop anybody from using it, but it may actually decrease the likelihood if they're about to create an override and they see this "do not use" in all caps with a bunch of exclamation points at the end. You can actually back that up with something from the Infront Consulting guys that actually alerts and lets you know if somebody's storing things in the default management pack. I don't want to tirade on the default management pack. You all have heard this. You all know. Just don't use it. We've already got that down. The other thing that's important is what do you create overrides for? And we've gone back and forth and left and right on this, and there's two things I'm going to state. First is, for simplicity's sake, create a management pack for every single management pack that you're importing that's a sealed MP. That's just going to save you a lot of grief. You never have to question where is it supposed to go. Don't create a company name underscore overrides. Or, as I did, don't create a Visine management pack. Get the red out of the environment. I know it's a bad pun. Because what you get there is, and I don't think the administrator of that particular environment's here today, but I wasn't the one that took the pain from this one. I got the call when he took the pain from this one. Because what happened was we were upgrading one of our third-party management packs. Tried to do the upgrade, and the upgrade wouldn't take, and we finally ended up having to delete the management pack to be able to continue with the process and then import the new version of the management pack. Here's what my friend out there ended up having to do. He ended up having to export 14 different management packs and hack the XML to pull pieces out of it. I did not get a thank you card from him that year, ever. It was off the Christmas list. It's a bad time. So we'll leave that all alone. But another thing, make sure you have a standard naming convention. There's debates over, do you use the management pack name in the beginning, or do you do overrides underscore and the rest? Nobody really cares. The reality of the situation is this. Pick one, use it, and define it someplace so that when somebody screws up, you can point out to them the fact that you defined it someplace. From a management pack tuning perspective, here's your only options. Fix it, acknowledge it, tune it, disable it. There may be something else out there, but I can't think of it. One thing I want to point heavily towards is the concept of tuning using groups. There's an existing white paper out there and webinar on this specific topic. Groups are dynamic, or can be dynamic, so they allow you to be able to adapt more quickly than having to manually deal with things. One of the other big things that gets you to get a benefit out of this is I can take that same grouping overrides. If I've got a dev environment, and I hope at least a percentage of the group out there actually has a dev environment, I can take those override management packs and I can port them, and then I can actually apply the same overrides in that existing environment, or the new environment, the production environment. How do you figure out what to tune? The System Center Central Health Check reports, top 20 alerts. You saw the dashboard one that I use, so it gives me the top 5 both on repeat count and by alert volume. That's great. Next thing is using distributed applications and synthetic transactions. We take our web server example that we talked about before, and I don't care about the default web server. Well, we're going to look at some of those now, where we actually go through and map those out. And what we do is we actually disable all the alerting on the low level, or we create the alerting on the low level to only go to a specific group. And then what we do is we alert off of the top level distributed application if there's things that are impacting the whole app. Definitely read the product knowledge. Just by show of hands, how many people out there, before I hit this again, how many people out there have heard of either Research This or the By Example series? Okay, we're about Quarter. Okay, so I'm going to hit this really fast. Research this management pack. It's available for download on System Center Central. It is free. It is the simplest management pack on the planet. But what it allows you to be able to do is take an alert, right-click on it, and look it up on a community repository. So if anybody else has fixed those problems, you can learn from their mistakes or their processes they went through versus having to recreate them from scratch. The By Example series, also on the System Center Central website, takes your core management packs, AD and DNS and the rest of them, and actually gives you an example of how do you install them, how do you download them, how do you tune them, all that type of stuff. So if you're going through this manually now, use that instead. Use the all alert views. One to mention here, manual event log correlation and historical analysis. Had an example where we actually had an application. I got a phone call out of the blue when I was in my car that our large-scale distributed application was gone. Okay, I don't know exactly what gone meant, but what I found out was by the time I got back to client site, everything was fine. I said, great. About a week later, I get a phone call. I'm in my car again. And doing root cause analysis, the only thing I could determine was it was caused by me being in my car. That wasn't the root cause, of course. So, same problem, distributed application's gone and the rest of it. Well, what we did is, and this is a great trick, we went in and we have a closed alerts view. We went back to that time window when the outage occurred. We went back 10 minutes before that time window, and we started looking at where the history came from. And what we found was our VMware Monitoring Management Pack was warning us that it had lost connectivity with the LUNs. Oh, that was kind of interesting. Whole thing's virtualized. That's interesting. So then we cross-referenced that exact time frame with our data center access logs. And we found out that our SAN vendors had been in during those exact same 2 time windows. So you all can figure out where this came from. So that's an example of you can go back, you can go 10 minutes before it happened and see what happened. All right, scoping. Why create custom groups? This is one of the key things to be aware of, as I mentioned before, which is, to some people, non-operations manager administrators, that might be just a little bit daunting. This list of hundreds of alerts that are sitting out there, that can easily be TMI, way too much information. So targeting is the key. To mention again the retailer group, what we did with them. So we gave them not only a group which represented their servers and actually provided them with their custom notifications as well, but we also gave them specific views here. So what they saw when they logged into the Operations Manager console was their servers, their alerts, their performance metrics. In addition to that, we augmented those and we gave them their custom dashboards. So you scope those to specific owners, you group them. You can use views to limit those, as I mentioned before. We've got a blog series on that, and then there's a white paper related to that on groups. Custom attributes is another one of these things that tends to get swept under the rug and nobody really realizes is out there. A custom attribute is, as an example, something as simple as a registry key. We had a client in the financial industry. What they actually had done was they had tiered all their servers. They had Tier 5 through Tier 1. Tier 5 being their lowest priority, Tier 1 being their highest priority. And we actually used custom attributes to gather this information and determine what areas these belonged in. So when they logged in, they could see their different group of computers within that view. We actually also tied it into Configuration Manager, and we use that for our patch management process. And there's a blog article on how you can use those custom attributes. Web monitoring is also one of the things that tends to be overlooked. We're going to go into custom synthetics here in a little bit, but we're going to start with just the generic ones. First off, what web monitoring does really well. It's a pre-built synthetic transaction. It can access a website. Okay? You can access websites which require credentials. So as an example, your SharePoint websites. You can have credentials provided as a run-as account, which will allow them to be able to successfully perform those tests. We also internally use external website testings to be able to test to validate not only can we get to the outside world from our data centers, but also what is our response times associated with this. Websites are also a key part of a distributed application. You see all the different pieces that you can use for this. And we can also use this for website monitoring for trend performance related to dashboarding. So we're going to show that here as we go into synthetic web testing and forecasting. All right, so we're going to start with a quick look at 2 different distributed applications. First off, the Catapult synthetic transactions, which I'm going to open up here in the diagram view, if I can get it right there. All right. So in here, you can tell I've got 6 or 8 total web server tests that are in play right now. So I can see those. I built it up as a distributed application. In addition to that, I want to also take a look at a second one, which is my Catapult web servers. So these are not the synthetics, but the underlying websites. Ooh, am I going to take a crash here? Yep. All right, hold on. Close out my gadgets on the side here in a minute. All right, so as we reload that, so we're going to take a look at 2 different distributed applications. All right, synthetic transactions again. And web servers. Oh, by the way, I'm going to point one other thing out here. Favorite tasks. This is another one of these things that kind of went through the UI that I never really noticed. I don't know if anybody had noticed this before, but favorite tasks allow you to be able to take a individual task that you like, right-click on it, and add it as a favorite so it's easier and accessible. So just a side point there. All right, so if we take a look at our different diagram views, again, I've got my 8 different websites. I've got my 8 different synthetic transactions associated with this. And now what I've got is I'm going to go ahead and stop 2 of my websites. Actually, I'm going to hold on those for a minute here. First, I want to show one other thing. So we're going to go back to our core here. You see what we've got with those. I'm going to start on my Catapult NOC here. And I'm going to go to our internal systems. Okay. So within this, we're now using the Service Manager dashboard to allow us to be able to graphically represent each of our different synthetic transactions. So picture for a minute if I've got a web farm of 8 different servers. I can be running synthetic transactions off of each of those individual 8 servers, plus I can also do a synthetic test off the top-level web server, which allows me to see those performances. In addition to that, I'm going to go to a forecasting report. So I could take a look at this as an example and say, not only do I want to see where I'm at now, but I want to forecast what this is going to look like 30 days from now. And we'll talk about the forecasting report here in a little bit. Now, that would not be complete, however, without pointing to one other big change in the Microsoft stack. One moment. All right, hold on a minute. These internal systems and the Catapult NOC. What's the answer they have? Okay. All right, I'm going to come back to that. But what we've got within there, and I need to find the URL to be actually able to show this, is Avocode. So for those of you who are familiar with Avocode, what it allows you to be able to do is in-depth level .NET monitoring. So what I've got here is not only am I seeing a dashboard view of my synthetic transactions and their timings associated with this, I can also take those and I can plug those into Avocode, and I can get back in-depth analysis from Avocode in terms of what it's providing. And if I get a couple of minutes here towards the end, I'll see if I can go ahead and figure out where I'm missing my URL on that one. But it appears it is not going to display for me right now. All right, so that brings us to the forecasting piece. So I implied, but I didn't flat out say where this comes from. A couple of MMSs ago, Daniel Savage from the Microsoft Operations Manager product team did a presentation, and he included 3 examples. Of those 3 examples, he included a report which allows you to be able to forecast on existing counters. So all you have to do this, because I was expecting that this is going to be some long, complicated process to figure out how to forecast. I actually booked a day to work on it. And what I found was it was really easy. I added the management pack. I ran the report. I selected my counters. And I told it, here's how long it's supposed to forecast for. And it just worked. So very straightforward. So if you need to do some rudimentary forecasting, it's a great management pack to take a look at. Now we're going to move into custom synthetic transactions. Let me explain why we care about these and what they are. I've got 2 examples that we're going to take a look here. This gets a little bit deeper than the rest of the stuff that we're talking about. The first is if I'm building a distributed application and I want to be able to query off of a database, I can use a simple OLE-DB check. So as an example, we'll go back over here. If I go to the authoring pane in my distributed or my management pack templates, I can create an OLE-DB data source test. Okay? That OLE-DB data source test is going to perform a simple check against a database. So I've got a sample one here. I can open this up. And what this in essence is going to show me is how do I connect, do a query off of it, how I can alert based on performance, and I can run it off of various different watcher nodes. Okay? That's not bad. That's a kind of a good benefit, because if you know in essence I'm going to build this and I'm dependent upon this database, I can now validate at least that I can communicate with the database. The problem with this is twofold. The first is I can't return data from this other than the response of a successful query. I might want to be able to say, as an example, run a query off of this table, and if I've got more than 100 records in this table, generate an alert based upon this. You can't do that with an OLE-DB data source example. Second one that we've seen is I want to be able to validate the ability to write to a database. So not only just read to it, but I want to be able to write to it, and I want to be able to log to it and validate the fact that it is being written to on a regular basis. So I'm going to open that up and show you what we've got associated with that one first. All right. So we're going to start here in the authoring pane. We're going to go into our monitors, and here's how we targeted this one. Starting with this one because we did a simplistic target on it. So here's what we've got. And what we've got is just a monitor that we generated, which is running scheduled. Every 5 minutes it's executing this. And it's just a script. So it's a script that was written by, one of the people out in the audience right now, which actually goes out and does this query, performs a series of different actions based upon it, and the rest. Depending upon how it replies back, with a bad or good, I can then impact the health state associated with this database. So this is, by the way, this has been blogged in detail all the way through the screenshots and everything of how do you create this exact example. So this is really useful if you want to be able to do those writing into the databases. Great for that type of stuff. He also did some really good stuff around event logging and the rest. So he actually writes to the event logs and lets you know if there were successes or failures and the rest of it. Now, that's great and that's very helpful. But what we've done in essence is we've impacted the health state of the DB engine. Okay? For a DB engine, that might make sense. Because if I can't read from that engine or I can't write to that engine, that might be reasonable. So that's why we targeted at the database engine. Now I've got a second customer that I'm working with that they had something far more complicated. What they had in essence was the following requirement. I'm going to import their management or sample management pack here in just a moment. So by the way, for those who haven't seen this, you can use the authoring console, direct connect up into your management group and pull down your live management packs. So what I've got here is the classes that I've defined, and let me explain while we go through this. So what they had was this. They need to do very complicated synthetic web transactions. And what they do is they write to the event log saying a success or a failure condition based upon their complicated synthetics that they've got. So what they did, logically enough, is similar to what we did originally within targeting the database engine. So they targeted the only place they had available, which was the gateway server, which this is running on. For those of you who've spent a lot of time working with Operations Manager, you can probably see the problem with that. Now your gateway is going red every time one of your synthetic transactions is failing. And you now can't design your distributed applications in a way that you can actually effectively see individual ones within your distributed application view. So what we did with them is this. We actually created, we're going to start off with the basics. So we created different images. So I've got here as an example, I've got a Catapult 16 and a Catapult diagram view. These images that we imported associated with this. And then I took those and I actually applied them to a class that I created. So this class I created as a public class, calling it logically enough Synthetica 1. Here's the key. System perspective. Because I needed my own target, I'm now building my own target. If you look at where the synthetics actually occur within Operations Manager, they're part of the system perspective. So what we've done here is we've created a brand new class in here with the following properties. I had to give it a key, and I assigned my images associated with it. And once I've done that, now I've got the target that I need. Because there was a great question that was asked a while back, which is, I created a monitor, but I want to put it in my distributed application. How do I put my monitor in a distributed application? The answer is, you don't. You can't. Because a monitor is not an entity. The only thing you can put into a distributed application is the entity itself. So what we've done here, in essence, is we've created our own entity, which is what I'm showing here. So I've got this custom synthetic as it stands now. And for the health model, I created a discovery associated with this. Here's my discovery. It's a very simple one, very lightweight. It's targeted at Microsoft Windows computer. I'm doing a discovered class called Synthetic 01. My configuration is just the registry setting that I'm looking for. So I'm running it every minute. For everybody in the audience, you would never, ever do that in a production environment. Okay? 24 hours is a great time frame for this. Okay? Granted, this is a very light discovery. A registry hit is almost negligible, but you still don't want to be doing it on your systems every minute. So what I've got here is I'm doing a check for existence of a specific key, and I'm giving it an attribute of a Boolean. And based upon the Boolean, I'm actually saying if I get this value synthetic equals true, that means that I found this on the system. So now we're going to step back and show how we put this together, and then I'll show what it looks like. So what I've done now is I've created a registry entry on my gateway servers for this specific key that needs to exist. I know that it's going to write to the correct event logs in that. I've generated my monitor, which I'll show you next. So my synthetic monitor here is targeted under the availability state, where my configuration, very simple monitor. This is just what we'd expect, you know. Where my source, my event ID, and the rest of it. I define my health condition associated with it. Okay, and I'm tying it together off of this target that I just generated. So now what I get is the following. When I open up the Operations Manager console here in the Distributed Application view, I can now open my Catapult time tracking application. I really wish DoubleClick wouldn't go to that. I really wish it would open up the diagram view. Check this out. So now what we've got is I have an individual line item here, a Catapult synthetic transaction. Notice it carried over my graphics. It'll actually show the small graphic also when it's appropriate there. And here's what they're doing with this. They're an industry where they're dealing with multiple different incoming data sources. So what they've got is 20 of what they call channels. So we've got 20 individual separate synthetic transactions that we're going to be checking for on that. We've got a mid-tier system associated with this, and we've got what they call a rate engine. All of those generate their own custom synthetics. These are all going to be dragged and dropped, put into a live map so they can take in one view and find out the health of their entire application off of that. So those are examples of our custom synthetic transactions and what we can do with them. All right, distributed applications. We are probably not going to have time enough to be able to go through this in a demo fully, so I'm going to hit it very light, but I'm going to talk through it really quick, and then I'm going to show you, and we'll let it bake, and you can figure it out from there because it'll make sense. Distributed applications are the most important power within this product, and they are also the most overlooked piece of this product. You can build up phenomenal amounts of stuff here. A couple of things first off. If you're ever creating a distributed application in the Distributed Application Designer, never use the everything option. I've done that multiple times, and when you do that, it's the kiss of death for that distributed application. The console's going to crash. You'll just never get anywhere with it. What you do instead is you find the entities that you want on the left, find them, add them into an individual component group, link them all together, life works great. Now, but to go back to our example that we saw before with our custom synthetics, or not our custom synthetics, our out-of-the-box synthetics, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shut down 2 websites that are currently being monitored. So I'm going to stop this one, and I'm going to stop this one, and I'm going to go back over, check my diagram view. So here's where my synthetics were before. And we're going to give them a little bit of time to bake. It's there running every 60 seconds. We have our second diagram view here, which is already beginning to update. So you can see it's already detected one of the 2 of these went red. And notice the fact that it's rolling upward. Okay. Now here's what we've got. And this is the out-of-the-box way that Operations Manager functions. I've got one red. Therefore, worst case of any of the entities down below, everything above it is now red. What tends to be missed, though, is the concept, this is functionality that you can change how it works. So as an example, I can open up the Health Explorer here. I can see where this component group went red. I can go to the monitor properties associated with this here, and I can generate an override for this object, and here's where the power comes in. I get to choose my roll-up algorithm. Best state and worst state is easy. Okay? Best state, as long as one of my 8 is running, life is happy. Worst state, default, that means one of them's down, therefore all of them are down. Worst state of a percentage is the most useful one that you're going to get in large web farms. So I can say, as an example, if more than 50% of my web servers are offline, then roll up red. And I can also then change my alerting mechanisms via override so that I don't actually see the alerts there that I'm not interested in. Now, as we take a look at the second diagram view, we have 2 synthetics that are failing here. I want to show one other piece of this, if it'll let me. All right. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Hold on. I wanted Health Explorer. So again, I'm using Health Explorer. It will intentionally fail a component, by the way, because it makes it so much easier to actually figure out where things are rolling up. So I could set the same override at this level, which is my top level of where it's going red. Or what we see with these is, and this is really annoying, is a lot of these actually alert. And via the fact that these things are alerting, that one doesn't. I think it's up here where we alert. There's 2 of them that will generate. So if you've got a synthetic transaction and your synthetic transaction fails, you get 2 alerts every single time. The great news is, just like everything else in Operations Manager, this is overrideable. So I can go in here, I can go to my monitor properties, I can generate an override, and I can say, for this particular object, where's my alerting? Generate alert now equals false. Or I can change, and this is what we do in a lot of places, I will actually change priority and severity. Because if you're doing your subscriptions where you're actually doing subscriptions based upon groupings, priorities, and severities, what you do is you lower the importance of these. They still go then to the people who are responsible for the websites, but then they don't get all of the noise. I mean, they do down below, but you only notify like your NOC and the rest of it when you're impacting the overall health of the distributed application. As you really don't want the 2 a.m. wake-up call because one of your 8 web servers is down. You want to nag your web guys about it, but you don't want to be the one taking the call, or at least I know I don't. All right, and we'll see if any of those updates real fast here. There we go, we're green now. So what we did with that is we changed the default behavior. So now, as opposed to that second higher level being red, it's now green because we changed the roll-up percentage associated with it. And for those of you who've heard of that, that's great. But there's a lot of Ops Manager administrators who haven't really seen that type of functionality before. So that's what we were taking a look with distributed applications and how we override those. Another commonly asked question is, how do I schedule a rule or a monitor in Operations Manager? And unfortunately, the answer is really painfully. For those of you who came from MOM 2005, it was really simple. It is not really simple in Ops Manager 2007. The links here should help. The first is, I found a trick working through actually Steve Rahi's article, which is referenced down below, and through Daniele's, that what we could do was we can actually open up an existing, I believe it was a rule. So we took a rule, we opened it up in the authoring console, and we were able to assign a schedule associated with that. I called the article, scheduling rules without having to have a degree in XML. So heads up on that one. It is possible. It is painful. You can also do one, and this is not as elegant, but we're all practical people here, so I'm going to tell the practical piece of this. You can also just not schedule it at all and handle it on the other side of the equation. So if you're running a VB script as an example, the first thing you can do is a logic condition on that and find out, hey, if this is outside of the windows that I'm monitoring, just return a green. It's very unimpactful because it's going to spawn it up, it's going to check it, it's going to return a green, and it's back out. So that's another option available if you need to do scheduling. Daily living, report generation. This is the one that most people truly and utterly hate within Ops Manager. Trying to generate a report out of Operations Manager is a phenomenally complicated thing. So I'm going to include 5 quick hints here, and we're going to be doing an article on this later on this year. The first is, with the R2 management packs, they released something called the Object Picker. So the Object Picker, let's see if I can actually, there we go, Zoom worked now. The Object Picker is this. If you see and you're trying to run a report and it says filter options have been applied, that means that all you're going to see is objects that actually have data. Okay, so that makes life a lot easier, because the reason why reporting is so difficult is you go out, you grab your objects, you put it all together, you run the report, and you got nothing. I know, I've been there regularly. So if you see the object picker, great one to use. The second trick is this. We never notice this because we just want to run the dang report. But if you look down in the details of the report itself, what you can actually see is this report finds data if the following objects are supplied. Windows operating system. So they're spelling out the individual object that you're looking for. Third, this is my favorite. I use monitoring views to run reports. So I'll open up a series of different, state view or a diagram view and the rest of it. And then you get in that bottom right-hand corner, you have the reports that are available down there. Those reports, as long as they're listed down there, they will pass whatever objects you're using. So that's a great way to be able to get those to go through that way. You are limited to a maximum of 10 objects that you can select. There's a reg hack, though. There's a reg hack to get around that, which is published out there. I've got it blogged out, and let me know. We can get it for you. So I bumped that up to 100, and as long as it's within the reasonable number, and as long as it's in that area, it works like a champ. So what I do with these, we'll hit performance view in a second. Let me go back there for just a second. What I do is I actually create state views. I create like a quick reports folder, and then I create a computer's state view or whatever object I see in those reports. And then as opposed to trying to run anything from the reports, I go to my state view, highlight the entities that I want, and then run a report from there, because I don't want to pick the objects. I'm lazy. Another one, and I definitely need to zoom in on this one. I know that. Another one is using the performance view to actually drive what components you need to write a custom report. This is a great trick, because if you're having to write your own custom reports, you're working off an existing performance report. You open that up, but then you need to know things like, okay, what's my path, what's my object, what's my performance object, my counter, and my instance. All right? Those are all available in the performance view. They're just not named the same thing. Some of them are, some of them aren't. So this one's blogged and linked as well. But what happens here is if you go into the performance view, you select the entities that you want, grab the performance objects that you want, grab a screenshot of it, then when you're generating your reports, you can actually pick the right pieces based upon what you screenshot off of this. And then I go through a series of how to create your own custom reports. The funny thing is how to create a free disk space report. Okay? That should be one of the easiest things in this product. But it is one of the most complicated things in this product. So if you wish to continue to bubble that up to Microsoft and let them know, I'd really love to just be able to grab a bunch of objects and run give me a disk space report on it. So that's actually one of the most heavily hit blog articles I've ever written, was how to create a simple free disk space report. And even my approach isn't that simple. All right, subscriptions. Less is more. The goal here is not to have people creating the rule which sends all of their alerts into a folder which then just clogs up your Exchange environment. I actually had a call, and the guys in the audience knows this, where we were generating 20,000 alerts a day. We actually were stress testing the Exchange system through this. And when we called Microsoft for support, they said, "You doing what? You're creating how many of them?" So the key on this is your subscriptions should follow this. Less is more. Only alert on the things that are critical, high priority. Okay? That's where I draw the line. If it's important enough to send me an email on it, it better be critical, high priority. Second thing is use your groups to target your subscriptions. When we talked about before, identifying these groups within this, an organization who owns an application, we group them, as I mentioned. Okay, we can also use those to target their subscriptions. So they get their subscriptions about their alerts related to their particular servers. Okay, there's a lot of tricks we could go through, but I know we're getting close on time, so I'm just going to mention a couple of them really fast here. Just an out-of-the-box thing to think about. These are actually a cool additional option to a diagnostic or a recovery. For those who are familiar with them, a diagnostic or recovery occurs when you change state of a monitor from green to yellow or yellow to red. You can actually run a diagnostic, tell me what's going wrong here, or a recovery, fix the situation. What you can actually do with a subscription is you can actually have it run a notification or a custom notification channel, and then what it's doing is it's running the script that you want it to run, but it's running it on the RMS. So now what you get is your diagnostics and recoveries are going to run on the remote agent. This allows you to be able to run a recovery if you want to on the RMS itself. So you can generate a subscription for that. And again, we're going to go through that in detail in a white paper in July. Quick Hits resetting health state. Green Machine. I love this utility. This is one of my favorites. So it's a command line utility to be able to reset health. That's really useful. The Green Utility or Green Machine Management Pack, about 1% more helpful than the Green Machine itself. I could say that because I wrote the Green Machine Management Pack. And what it does is allows you to be able to put that as a task that you can run within the Operations Manager console. So those are really useful. But let me pull these together as to an example of what you could do as an automated defragmentation approach. Microsoft did a great thing with the operating system revision of the recent update to the management packs. They added logical disk fragmentation levels. And everyone out here who's run that management pack knows that Sunday at 3 o'clock in the morning, you got like 6,000 warnings that came through telling you drives were fragmented. Well, here's how they built it. It runs once a week, 3 o'clock in the morning, and it goes to a warning state. Okay, that's kind of cool, somewhat. Okay, they created a task, and the task is kind of cool because you can run the task to defragment something. However, there's problems with that. And the problems with that, in essence, is now that I've defragmented this thing, I have to reset the health of that. Otherwise, it will never know that it was defragmented because it only checks once a week. So without going into too much of a detail, we actually used Green Machine as part of an automated defragmentation routine. So we had the recovery, which kicks off on a group of servers, and then we leveraged Green Machine to actually force the reset of the health state so that every week we could force through automated defragmentation. And I wouldn't say it on production servers, of course, but definitely within some test servers, it's something to check out. Also, if you're really, really stuck and you need to force a reset, maintenance mode forces a reset of your monitors. Put something in maintenance mode for about 5 minutes, it'll go back to green for temporary until it finds its new red again. Maintenance mode, while we're on that, there's nothing built into the product which allows you to be able to schedule maintenance mode. That would be really cool. Hopefully something they're going to do in OM12. Hint, hint. But for now, what you've got is a couple of good ones here. One is a GUI-based one by Timothy McFadden. There's also a web-based one that Steve Rahi did. There's a blog article here about how to put all your servers into maintenance. I actually, and I may be odd man out on this, I like the idea of putting everything that I'm going to patch into maintenance mode for the entire duration of it. And I don't like it just because I don't like getting nagged on the alerts. I like it because it forces everything back to green, and when it comes back up, I get that whole plethora of alerts that comes through that were lost because somebody had a monitor that went red and they closed the underlying alert. It's forcing them to get those back again and have to deal with them. Auto-closing alerts, one other thing to consider here. SQL job failures. Okay, they occur, you get them, they sit there forever because they're from a rule. Okay, there are a lot of times that you have to have rules. I understand that. They don't close themselves automatically. Monitors do, rules don't. So we've got a couple of options here that work really well. Scheduled Resolution Update, or the SRU Management Pack. This is good if you've got just 3 or 4 of these little naggy alerts out there, or that you just want to close out regularly. Every hour, just force these things to a close. You can also do a script-based approach. I've got a colleague out here who actually went and wrote a great script that does mass volumes of alerts, because what they've done is they have hundreds of custom rules that they had created, generating thousands of alerts. And the result of that is, in essence, all this garbage in the UI that they didn't want. So they actually auto-close those via script. And to put a great plug in here for Opalis, this is a great example of a workflow. This is something where, you know what, if I detect this alert, I can perform a runbook action to be able to close the corresponding alerts associated with it. All right, a couple last odds and ends here. Maintaining your Ops Manager environment. First, don't forget your backups. They're important. You've got the reference to the session associated with that. Second one, and I see this regularly, watch your antivirus exclusions. I do not know how many environments we've been bid in now where they said, no, we have absolutely excluded the Ops Manager folder from antivirus scanning, and it wasn't, and it caused corruption, and it's an ugly, ugly situation. Third, link on this one again, Kevin Holman has a great blog article on how to do SQL maintenance for your Ops Manager, data warehouse, and the rest of it. And the fourth one, again, having been bid on this one multiple times, it's no fun, I know this. But on a weekly basis, open up your Operations Manager event log. Take a look in it. Filter it by criticals and warnings. See what you've got. I've got a blog article which explains out there how you can exclude specific event IDs where you say, you know what, I don't care about these. And watch what's going on. Because 9 times out of 10, if anything's wrong in your environment, you're going to find it here. I had an example, and I'm not going to throw the vendor under the bus, but I had a third-party management pack that we had a client site that they imported it. And I got a call about 2 weeks later, and they told me that their ops manager environment was having some problems. Some problems was we can't create any more synthetic transactions and we can't reset health state. I said, okay, that's probably problems. So we dug into it, took a look at it. The only hint that we ever found what the root cause was one warning in the ops manager RMS log that was telling us that there was a specific management pack that had been imported that was causing the entire environment to no longer function. Once we found it, we pulled that management pack out, and life was good again. All right, finally, what's next? Potential next steps here. I've focused on Ops Manager as a framework and a monitoring solution in essence. Don't forget, there's two whole major components to this that are not anywhere near as used. The first, agentless exception monitoring, AEM. I'm not going to explain them to you. Most of you all have heard of these. Audit collection services. If you need to think about compliance, SecureVantage actually provides an additional pack on top of this that can assist you with providing compliance capabilities. Integrating this within your rest of your System Center stack. Service Manager and Opalis. Service Manager can auto-generate tickets and auto-close tickets and the rest of it based upon conditions that you see. And also, you can get more into your framework. Go out there, get the Unix systems. If they're out there and they'll let you add them, go get them. Go get Crossplat installed. Get VMware monitoring installed so you can actually find out what's going on behind the scenes there. And .NET monitoring as well. The Avocode acquisition puts Microsoft in a very unique situation where they can truly deep dive into what's going on within one particular .NET application. And I know there's sessions on Avocode, but I'm only going to give you the 60-second summary on this. I can actually have a .NET website where I find out if it's going over 500 milliseconds to be able to respond a request back to the user. I can track that, and I can see detail down to the exact SQL query that's being called off of that database. And that's all built into OM now. All right. Long-winded, I know, and you all have been very, very patient, and I want to get a chance for everybody to ask questions who wants to ask questions, and I will stay until they kick me out. So I wanted to bring up a couple of things. First off is, if you saw something in this session that it's not blogged on and you want it blogged, send me or put it in your eval. For the evals, by the way, you actually have to go out, open up the session, and the rest of it. You guys have probably already seen that. And I will blog on those. If you want to get higher priority on this because y'all are sitting in here hearing me, use the keyword leverage. Okay? Our OM book lead complained on a regular basis that I use that word too much, so that's my way to be able to actually use it.